Hello! Today we're going to talk about 13 brutal serial killers. What makes people brutally kill their own kind? They look ordinary, but they like to torture and kill people. Dr. Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was an English physician and one of the most horrific serial killers in the history of mankind, who was proven to have committed 250 murders. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader was an American serial killer who murdered 10 people in Sedgwick County, Kansas, and Wichita, Kansas, between 1974 and 1991. He coined the nickname BTK, which refers to the way he killed his victims, bind, torture and kill, and sent anonymous letters to the police with each murder. Donald Henry Gaskins. In 1969, Gaskins became a serial killer, picking up hitchhikers on the highway and then torturing and mutilating his victims. In his autobiography, he referred to this series as the Coastal Murders. He was taken into custody in 1975 when Donald's accomplice went to the police and told them about the murder of 2 young men. Haskins confessed to killing 80 to 90 people, but this was not confirmed. He was sentenced to death, but while on death row he committed another murder. Fred and Rose West. Between 1967 and 1987, Fred West and his wife Rose tortured, raped and murdered at least 10 young women and girls, most in their home at 25 Cromwell Street, Gloucester, which was later dubbed the House of Horrors. Arthur Shawcross. Known as the Genesee River Killer, Shawcross committed his first murder in 1972, raping and brutally murdering a 10-year-old boy whom he lured into a wooded area in Watertown, New York. He then raped and murdered an 8-year-old girl, for which he was captured and charged with involuntary manslaughter. After serving 14 years in prison, he was released in 1988 and brutally murdered 12 prostitutes aged 22 to 59. Edmund Kemper was an American serial killer and necrophiliac who carried out a series of brutal serial murders in California in the 1970s. At the age of 15, he killed his grandparents and later murdered and dismembered 6 women hitchhiking in the Santa Cruz area. Later, he killed his mother and one of her friends, and surrendered to the police a few days later. In November 1973, he was convicted of 8 murders. Known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer who raped, murdered and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He was also a necrophiliac and ate his final victims by cooking them in the backyard of his home. Dennis Nielsen was a homosexual killer who murdered 15 men of non-traditional sexual orientation in his home in London between 1978 to 1983. He kept the bodies of his victims for some time, then burned them or flushed them down the toilet. Chinese-American serial killer Charles Ng is believed to have raped, tortured and murdered 11 to 25 people with his accomplice Leonard Lake at the latter's ranch in Calaveras County, California. They videotaped themselves raping and torturing their victims. Their crimes came to light in 1985 after Lake committed suicide when he learned that Ng had been caught shoplifting at a hardware store. Daniel Camargo Barbosa. This man was a Colombian serial killer who was believed to have raped and murdered more than 150 young girls in Colombia and Ecuador in the 1970s and 1980s. He calmly confessed to killing 71 girls in Ecuador after escaping from a Colombian prison. He led the police to the place where he collected the bodies of the victims. After raping the girls, he killed them with a machete. Andrei Chikatilo was a Soviet serial killer nicknamed the Rostov Butcher. Between 1978 and 1990, he raped and murdered at least 52 people, including women and children. John Wayne Gacy. Gacy raped and murdered 33 teenagers and young adults between 1972 and 1978 in Chicago, Illinois. He lured the victims to his home with the promise of money or a job, then strangled them with a tourniquet. He buried 26 of the victims in his yard and dumped the bodies of the next victims into the Des Plaines River. That's it. Subscribe to the channel and like this video. Be careful and see you in the next videos.